All right, let's get after it here. So, weekend update, gonna be a pretty fun exercise today, folks. I'm gonna combine a little bit of everything in an analysis. I'm gonna get to after what I'm gonna share just to kick off the agenda. We're gonna look at a pretty big event Tuesday coming up, right? Uh, and so, what has happened traditionally in the last two election cycles in terms of risk assets, and then Bitcoin, we're going to look at really quickly to kick off the call to frame uh, what's next, which is basically a structural look at Bitcoin off the lows from a Wyckoff standpoint, combining that with Elliott Wave, combining that with just overall sentiment, combining that with the seasonality as we're moving into year end, which also combines with what I'm kicking this call off, the stream off with, which is the analysis of what has happened in previous election cycles. Just because something's happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future, right? So the things I'm talking about could go up, down, sideways. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. Please use this as just education. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just here to present my convictions like I have for the last couple of years. And so to kick this off, we're looking at on the top here, we're looking at S&P 500. Okay. And we're looking at this uptrend. Has it mattered who's been, technically in charge? No, it really hasn't. Okay. The direction here has been clear. Zooming out a little bit, since the great financial crisis, we have been in just a massive uptrend. Okay. So do I think Tuesday is going to make a difference in terms of the long-term trajectory? No, I don't. I don't. For Bitcoin, I don't think it matters. Bitcoin is what matters, not who's the CEO or the pretend CEO for the next 4 years. All right. So with that, now it certainly could create some volatility and short-term differences. That is for sure. I just think the long-term direction trend um, is agnostic of that this type of event and or outcome. All right, so looking at what the S&P has done, we're going back to 2012, okay, election cycle. Going into the election, we had 5-6 weeks of down in terms of a flat correction. This was the C wave of the correction, and then we literally went up for 2 years straight following that presidential election. This is Coinbase. I don't have Bitcoin Coinbase data because Coinbase didn't exist around there, and I'm only really concerned about the most recent events as it relates to Bitcoin to gain, I think, the most potential correlation. 2016, August to November, again, we saw a downtrend for several weeks going into it, and then exploded out of it for the next couple years. Pretty nice appreciation there in markets. What did we see with Bitcoin? We saw, this consolidation where previous all-time high, we saw consolidation into that region, and then it exploded out of it. In essence, you got a double within 3 months, and then check back, and then into this final blow off. So again, that was the beginning of a final leg type move in Bitcoin in 2016. What do we see in markets? In 2020, we saw a flat little correction here, ABC flat correction, 1, 2, 3 weeks going down into the election. And then what do we have here, folks? Big surprise, big shocker. Seasonality and election year combined to be very bullish, again, regardless of who was the president, right? This was Trump. This was Biden. So again, do I really think that, do I think it has an impact? No, I don't. Bitcoin. What did Bitcoin do in that environment? It went from consolidating. Where did it consolidate again going into the election, folks? Wow, big shocker at a key important region, a previous all-time high. And then went on from that, what was it, going into it around $15,000 almost tripled within the next 4 or 5 months. So does that mean it's going to triple within the next 4 or 5 months here? Doesn't mean that, but we have a pattern here that's emerged that I'm not ignoring, combined with the rest of my analysis is what shapes what I think is probably the most bullish setup we've seen since, shocker, 2020. All right. Next, what do we have here? We have two weeks of weakness coming into the election, so much more muted than the last two. That just is a sign of strength to me. Again, coming out of, we had a little correction here, and now just kind of been consolidating that gain. To me, S&P is poised for a major move going into the end of the year. Bitcoin, it's again, very similar to what we saw, has been consolidating right at that important key level. And so my view is continuation. The path, short-term path, who knows? I have no idea. I have some ideas. I don't know, right? None of us know. Okay, next. Next, this is a fun exercise, folks. I've been really wanting to kind of put together a video that encompasses the way that I look at markets. I don't just look at, for example, an Elliott Wave perspective. I don't just look at a trend perspective. I don't just look at a Wyckoff perspective. I don't just look at sentiment. I don't just look at the S&P. I try to combine all these things to formulate why I believe what I believe and what I think is the highest probability that's going to come next. And so to frame this entire conversation from an Elliott Wave perspective, and a Wyckoff perspective, a lot of these things are very much intertwined, right? And so I have a Wyckoff accumulation schematic. For all intents and purposes, this is your basing, right? If we're looking at trend analysis, which you all have seen me do a lot of, right? You got stage 1 basing, stage 2 uptrend, stage 3 distribution, stage 4 downtrend, stage 1 basing, right? And you've got the 30-week moving average, right? And starts to look like that with the 30-week. And so, or excuse me, no. So 30-week, right? You're coming in, and then you get above it, and then you get some distribution around it, and then price gets below it, okay, and then comes back, okay? And so we're most interested in this stage 2 uptrend. Stage 1 basing, right, which is basically what I'm showing us here on the chart, is another way to look at a Wyckoff major accumulation. And whether it's a major accumulation or a reaccumulation or a primary wave count or a minor wave count or a sub wave count, these concepts are all the same, right? On different time frames, a lot of these things can be occurring. Just like I always use that broccoli analogy, the big piece of broccoli, and then you'd rip off a piece and the small pieces look like the big pieces. And if you look at them really close, right? They are all kind of doing similar type of things in terms of movement, in terms of market reaction. And so I'm starting here because I think this is a fun exercise. And here's what we're going to do. Okay, we're essentially going to look for commonalities, and I'm doing this to formulate where I think we are right now and what I think potentially is coming next, and to find some commonalities and to use. And what trumps all this again was that chart I just shared with you in terms of what the S&P 500 is doing, what the Nasdaq is doing. We're in price discovery. We're in the most potentially the most historic bullish time for risk assets. And so when we look at November 2021, right? Clear downtrend, right? Clear downtrend, trend analysis. Important level, this preliminary support level back in May of 2022 at 25K. We kind of bounced there, and then a lot of selling showed up at this order block, and that's when this market changed and we dove down in June. And so I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to show you what that looks like on the Wyckoff schematic, right? We've got this selling climax SC, selling climax SC, PS preliminary support, PS preliminary support. And this preliminary support region is important because what did it go back to, right? That area all the way back to the summer. All right, that's support. This is a support area. It needs to hold. Very important by the market participants in terms of their view. And this order block that I've highlighted in this green here, this is where a lot of sellers showed up, right? A lot of sellers showed up and that level was lost. So that's kind of key in looking into the future here. So if we think about what happened in this entire event, okay, and I'm basically calling this entire accumulation event May of 2022, and the accumulation event ended in March of 2023. We didn't enter official expansion, so phase E up here, expansion, and that's the uptrend in trend analysis, and that's an impulse, right? That's typically the third wave, right? Is that most powerful? So third wave most powerful, stage 2 uptrend, expansion. When we look at Wyckoff, right, kind of combining all these elements, we didn't enter that expansion until October of 2023. So this is a massive, massive accumulation event. And so we had this preliminary support, rejected, selling climax, automatic reaction. We had a secondary test, kind of come up here, fail, right? Fail right at this level of this preliminary support, right? Boom. That was a lot of supply there. Offloaded, market continued to go down. Secondary test in this phase B, attempted a reverse, no go, and then this failed. We had a spring, and from a macro wave count, this is what I'm kind of calling the macro wave 4, right? Where it's all over. The sentiment's the worst, market's going down further, it's all over. You had the whole crypto's over on all the, Time Magazine and The Economist and all that. But that was the spring. FTX lows. We had a coming out of it, 1, 2, and a test of that area. This downtrend line, really important, right? Going all the way back to 2021. That's where we saw. So I'm calling this minor 3 kind of ABC4 test, and this last point of support, LPS, which was this 4, retested that downtrend line and then broke out of it, okay? And so if we get rid of that for a second, if we take a look at, just take a look specifically now, I'm going to zoom in. So let me get rid of, if we just kind of look at even coming out of this, coming out of the low here, and I'm going all the way back to this low, this spring in this test wasn't obvious, right? This was something that took months to form. And here's just another type of accumulation schematic, because these things happen on low time frames as well. And so if we look at, let me get rid of this downtrend line. If we kind of look at what happened, zooming in, we see very similar, a little reaccumulation within this spring, right? Where we had this phase A, and you have this selling climax, automatic reaction, secondary test. You have this kind of up thrust here, kind of like we have illustrated here. And then we have a check back to a last point of support, but you never had a spring. You don't always have a spring in these reaccumulations. And so that ended up just being another last point of support, and then sign of strength, and then expansion on the lower time frame, okay? And so we see these things show up just like I have illustrated, on the screen. I've got the sub wave counts, right? And so coming out of this spring, we had kind of a leading diagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Sub to make the minor, ABC 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. to make that minor three. And a lot of these like corrective moves, right, happen at important areas. This two, that minor two was occurred at the test area, right? Spring test two, and so we are going to move on, right? Just kind of seeing how these markets move on different time frames, looking at these accumulations, these reaccumulations, uh, these patterns in different ways. And so now let me bring this chart back up. This is back to the major accumulation. Okay, let me get rid of that. Back to the major accumulation. And so what you saw, and I started doing these videos in this area in 2023. And for those of you who've been following me, I was saying, all right, we are in a sign of strength, SOS here, and my expectation was for us to get out of here and get moving. What we had was a flat correction, right, where we had an A, B, C. Everyone was getting really bearish at these 25, 24 level was breached. But in essence, and again, this is all part of learning, right? And I'm learning, I always learn the more that I do this. But this order block here, this was a key pivotal point in the market that caused us to take that next level down, right? And so there was a lot of supply that was offloaded there, right? A lot of supply that was offloaded in that region, and it just took a lot to get out of it. And once we got out of it, we didn't test. And I was talking about not looking for any kind of retest of this 31K level because I thought that would be bearish. And we never got it. And so that part of the equation I got right. The timing of this part of the equation I got wrong. I was looking for that reversal in July, August, and it didn't happen for another 2-3 months. 2-3 months, folks. Okay. But just a beautiful sign of strength, compression, right? Another way to look at this is just compression. The longer the consolidation, add a sign of strength, SOS, above all this, this entire accumulation phase, the more powerful the expansive move. And we did see a very powerful expansive move, right? Let me actually get rid of this just so it's not cluttering up our view. And so since then, we've seen just a very powerful expansive move, okay? And I've got the primary 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think we're on our way to 5. And so let's just kind of zoom in at the next little reaccumulation event to see, again, because we're always looking for impulses, and I see that a lot on the timeline. Well, this move doesn't look impulsive. That move doesn't look impulsive. It looks corrective. Can you have a corrective move initiate an impulse? I believe you can. I believe you can. Down here, we did see kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This 4 did overlap 1, but that can happen in a leading diagonal. I think that's kind of what you saw here. Okay. And that's, we would only see that in a 1 or an ending diagonal in a 5. And so let's go here. And this is the end of the summer 2023 event. And let me just pull up another schematic. Which one do I want to pull up? I'll pull up this one. Okay. And so this is just another kind of a reaccumulation schematic. And let's see if we see any similarities. Let's see if we see any similarities. Well, what do we have? Excuse me, folks. We have a couple things that look very similar to the schematic we're looking at in this image at the top, right? We have a selling climax. We had kind of this automatic reaction, secondary test, sign of strength, kind of getting up to the top towards this preliminary support region, right? This is the preliminary support region. So sign of strength, you get up and over. Oh, we're going to reverse here. Nope. We got to move back. ST secondary test in phase B, and then what I'm calling a 1, 2, 3 ABC. I do not see 5 legs in this move, folks. I do not see 5 legs in this move. I see 3 legs in this move. I also see no spring, right? No spring here, just like we have up here. We just had a check back to a last point of support. And the last point of support in this image was this order block, this bullish order block that I've got highlighted. So where demand stepped in, where the market shifted dramatically in its low time frame course, and it checked back to that bullish order block. And third leg, which constitutes, in my opinion, this minor one, A, B, C. So SOS, SOS, SOS just means sign of strength, right? High end of this region, sign of strength, check back, last point of support. And then finally, you had this wick into this first order block. So there's a lot of selling there. Even made it up to the second one, a lot of selling there, consolidated for a few days before it finally moved. Okay. All right, now let me move on to the next the next event. This one is really clean. This one is really clean from a Wyckoff perspective. And folks, I don't have volume up right now. I like to you should be using volume as well to confirm, right, towards the end of these accumulation events. So reaccumulation volume goes down and then volume steps in at the end, okay? Let's look at same example here, right? So selling climax into a spring, right? You're seeing that supported by volume. We're seeing then muted volume, and then volume stepping in towards the end, last point of support prior to expansion. Okay. So now I'm just going to get rid of volume just because I don't want a lot of things up on my chart, so it's clearer to see. And let's take a look at this this lower time frame reaccumulation in the context of the larger expansive phase. So folks, the market right now is in an uptrend, right? So we are in a stage 2 uptrend, consolidated at the beginning of December, reaching a buying climax of at 44,000. Preliminary supply, so PSY, as you'll hopefully can see on that schematic above, I've got highlighted here, right? This consolidative move, preliminary supply, then we had a buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary test, and then we had this just crazy upthrust in phase B. And this really extended a lot further than you typically see them. This was when the ETFs came out, and that ended up being just that, an upthrust in phase B, fake out, creek, move down to the bottom end of the range, spring, test, and then coming out of here, checking back to a last point of support, jump across the creek, sign of strength, consolidation, where? Upthrust phase B, at or above that region or slightly below it, doesn't matter. It's the location, right? Just a sign of strength, and then expansion. So this one was really textbook, really beautiful. Let's just take a quick look at volume. And again, same kind of concept, right? Where you had, kind of volume muted, and then it starts to step in, really starts to step in towards that sign of strength area. All right. Notice something else here with the wave counts, right? I've got my primary 3, right? A, B, C, 4. So 4, we had a spring. So again, kind of combining the two elements we saw there. Coming out of this 4, we did have a clear 5-wave move, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it shows up a little bit better online for those that are having trouble seeing that with the candles. You want to do this exercise on your own. Just throw it up in line and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flat correction ABC. It shows up a little bit easier. And so now let's fast forward to where we are now. That was a long kind of prelude into where we are now because I think it's educational. And I think I really want to give, especially the folks that have recently just started following me or watching my videos, more of a guide as to, how I formulate my analysis because I do see a lot of talk about things about perps and leverage being used in futures markets, and this isn't spot based. And again, I don't pretend to understand any of that. I don't know anyone that's highly levered in the futures market. My speculation is this has to do with institutions and some type of arb as it comes to them buying spot for the ETFs. I don't know. Maybe because it takes a day or so to settle. I have no idea. I have no idea. But what I do know is everyone has access to the data, and the market is a discounting mechanism. And so what trumps everything for me is that the three things that I'm sharing here in terms of what the price is telling me and the story it's telling me. Okay. And so if I'm looking at, let's get back in here and let's pull up the same reaccumulation schematic and just say, all right, what do we see? What do we see exhibited here in this price action? I've got the wave counts up as well. I've got the order blocks up as well. Again, though, that's areas where the market changed direction. A lot of spot buyers or sellers showed up, and you saw a dramatic shift in the market structure. So if I'm looking at this image, this is 7 months of just consolidation where we came into our buying climax, we had an automatic reaction, we had a secondary test, and then kind of came back and undercut that automatic reaction, kind of like we're seeing here, right? Buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary test, undercut it here, up thrust in phase B where we didn't exceed the buying climax, okay? So not exactly what we're looking at on the schematic. And then we just had to move down and undercut all the previous price action. That's what the spring is on the schematic. Came out of it in 1-2, kind of a three-legged move, which is what I'm calling this minor one. And then ABC into this test like we see up here. And then I think we're coming out of it with a sub 1, ABC2, and then working on this sub 3. Why do I say all this? Well, I say all this based on everything I just shared with you. Okay, location, time, duration, what risk markets are doing, sentiment. I mean, I don't see a lot of euphoria, maybe for a day when it got to 73, 74, there's some euphoria. I got one text from a friend, that was it. But now we're at 69, 215, and consensus is, oh, this is a failure again. We're going to fail and we're going to go back down. The mid 60s is all but guaranteed, and that could happen. That could very well happen. Where I'm wrong on this count could be, well, I could be wrong in many ways, right? On the lower time frames, I'm going to get less accurate. Where we saw, let's come back here. So again, remember, this was 1, 2, 3. That's a three-legged move. And what happened after that? After the correction that ensued, market went into full-blown expansion. Okay. So the fact that we didn't see impulsive movement coming off the lows in September 11th of 2023 was inconsequential. If you were looking for just that, then you would have been left out. What could I see potentially as a correlation to where we are now in terms of the price action? Potentially us seeing a leading diagonal ABC. So what would that look like where we are now? That would be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we just made 5. And this is really the minor one. And then you've got an A, B, C. And in that case, it could go down even further than the mid 60s, for sure. It could easily come down to this test this demand in the high 58s. This is not my base case. It's just a possibility because there's always possibilities of everything happening. Uh, where you've got that kind of diagonal structure, and then it's gone for a three. So that's the other scenario that I'm looking at. Uh, but given where we are, given where we're consolidating, right, we've got this downtrend starting from March. We're undergoing just a retest right now of that area. If we look at where the majority of this volume has been trading, well, let's just look at volume in general. We don't have a lot of volume coming in right now. But again, we tend to see that when we get into like I just shared with you, the SOS sign of strength area a bit more. And so we saw a little bit of volume come in, but just not enough to support and not a surprise, the expansion that we'd want to see. But let me just get rid of that, get rid of this. I want to take a look at one more thing because I do feel like volume by level is also important. It kind of gives us some clues. I'm going to anchor, see where the greatest amount of volume since this preliminary supply region where we broke expansion back in February 2024. So basically what I just did was anchored it, and that can be found anchored volume profile. And we see the most amount of Bitcoin has transacted at this red line here, right? That's the biggest node. Here's the second biggest volume node, this 67 to 68 region, which we're currently above right now. And so I've got jumping across the creek, no surprise. Where did we jump across the creek? At that 62, 63 region, the most volume that was traded, right? Where are we checking back to a last point of support? The second most heavily traded, or not traded, but heavily transacted level for Bitcoin since February of 2024. All right, folks. Last one is the Bitcoin miners. I've had some requests for various miners, CleanSpark, I think Mara. I'm just using WGMI because this is the proxy for the entire index, in my opinion. And this is a bullish chart. I'm sorry. There's just no way around it. There's no way around how bullish this chart looks. Why does it look bullish? Well, where is the entire history of this index? Where is most of this price action? Let's just look at where it's located. Most of it is located in that region. Okay? We had a deviation. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. We had a deviation here. Do we see two deviations out of this massive accumulation? I don't think so. I really just don't think so. I don't think we see two deviations. Not when we break an RSI, the moving averages is a weekly. Right, we broke out of it, right? Kind of like we broke out of it back here in November 2023 before what happened, right? Made a major move. Kind of like we broke out of it coming out of in May of this past summer. Difference here is we're above all these key moving averages. We've got, from a structure standpoint, right? What is that? That's just an inverted head and shoulders, right? We're checking back to that breakout level. And so I can't be bearish here. I have to be very bullish when all the signs are showing me, again, when the most amount of volume transacted in this entire index since its inception was the 1771 level, and that was defended. And we've got these long-term EMAs all right coiled up. We had a check back to them here back on October 7th. I see continuation. So that's it, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend and look forward to checking back next week.